So a little bit about my background. I've been in law enforcement for the last 27 years. Spent 21 years with the city of Belmont, went through the ranks, managed both sides of the house, operations and support services. In 2007, had an opportunity to come here. I lateraled captain to captain to the city of Burlingame. Spent a couple of years as the operations captain, and chief retired in 2009, and I was fortunate enough to be selected for that position. Getting there was a little unique, and I'll go a little bit more into that in the presentation. So if we can go, yep, one more. So historically in the past, communication centers have been built for each individual city, each single agency for their own use. These systems that were designed to meet local requirements and were not usually compatible with their neighboring agencies. Over the last couple decades, we've seen a movement towards consolidation of communication centers, dispatch centers, if you will. Slide. So the Great Recession really impacted San Mateo County. Probably some of the biggest impacts, we used to have 23 police agencies. The sheriff's office is slowly but surely starting to provide police services on a contract basis. They took over in the last 3 years now, the city of San Carlos, Half Moon Bay, and Millbrae. With that, the Public Safety Communications, our county dispatch center, had been providing dispatch services to Broadmoor and East Palo Alto, but with the sheriff taking over those contracts, Public Safety Communications now dispatches for those 3 cities, along with all of the fire departments and EMS in the county. A couple other shared services, dispatch arrangements in the county are the city of South San Francisco provides dispatch services to the city of Pacifica 24 hours a day, and after hours, weekends, and holidays for the town of Colma, and San Mateo PD provides dispatch services to the city of Brisbane. So one of the things that we ran into is the recession started, and cities decided that they were looking for ways to cut cost and not having to pay more for hardware, software needs. They started talking about mergers, consolidations, and contracts. And what we found out was it was extremely confusing. You know, you really got to sit down with people that are making the decisions and decide what they want, because consolidation, the definition of consolidation to one is not the same to another. So during the recession, the city of San Mateo, so it would have been back in like 2008, city of San Mateo and Burlingame hired a consultant to determine the benefits of a complete merger of the departments. What was supposed to happen, or the direction given to the consultant, was we want to have one police department and that's it. As that started to move forward, the city of Burlingame recognized that, well, we don't want to subsidize the city of San Mateo and have the officers floating across into San Mateo for the majority of the day, so they demanded that they have at least 4 officers in town. By the time that consolidation study was done, there was, I think it was less than $500,000 in savings, and by the time you split that up, 75-25, Burlingame said, if it's not $500,000 to us, it's not worth doing. But the consultant came back, not sure if it was an opportunity for another project or there was true value to it, but they looked at the opportunity to merge our communications and records. That brought up some more talk about, do we want to keep a facility open in Burlingame? Do we want a place where the community can go to get service 24 hours a day? So they said, well, let's take a look at it and see what happens. So as they started doing the study, the city said, well, we really want a place where people can go. So we said, okay. Ended up with that study. I think there was $250,000 in savings total. Of that 75-25 split, City of Burlingame said, you know what, by the time we give up a couple dispatchers and move the rest over to San Mateo, we'll have to add a couple records clerks to keep the facility open. It's really a wash. So that kind of disappeared. At the same time, in the county, Daly City, South San Francisco, and Pacifica, we're talking about building a fairly large dispatch center in the north end of the county. And prior to this, prior to the sheriff taking over for San Carlos contracted with Menlo Park to provide dispatch services. So fast forward to 2012, San Mateo Grand Jury decided to take a look at, do we need 13 separate police dispatch centers in the county? And their basic issues were the cost of providing public safety communications and what caliber of service we're providing by having 13. They came back and their findings were pretty simple. Consolidation of dispatch is fiscally prudent and fiscally beneficial to all parties involved. We started looking at that, 13 separate agencies, and responded to the grand jury. And the final recommendation of that study was each of the cities should have a backup arrangement with another PSAP to ensure that dispatch services continued on in case of a disaster. So as this was moving forward, and being a fairly new interim chief, I asked a simple question to three bright people. I knew that we could have radios in two places. I knew that we could have our CAD RMS in two places, but everybody told me we couldn't have 911 and business lines ring in two different locations. So I posed the question, and I'll let Christine tell you about how we got to where we are.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Jackie, for inviting us. I don't know if any of you have worked for a paramilitary organization in a police department, but when the chief asks you a question, you have to have an answer. And so we had to do that. We had to find another agency that was similar, like ours, that was willing to do shared services or partner, and then also wanted to spend the money to build the infrastructure, the CAD, the RMS, and the phone system. And we found a partnership in San Bruno. That was our response. So when Jackie and I were part of the team of communication managers, we had to respond to the grand jury report. And one of the questions was asked, if you did go for a consolidation or a merger, what were the costs associated with it? And because we had such old systems in place, it didn't matter if, if we moved forward with that, we still had to buy a new CAD RMS. So the costs associated with it were not going to be seen in maybe till 5 years out. So this was the partnership that we decided to have with San Bruno, because they were willing to take a look at this, partnership with us. And the chiefs and the council approved a consultant to come in, and for $25,000, they went and looked to see if this was even feasible for our agencies. These were some of the steps, and I know it's kind of concise and succinct, but prior to this, we had several meetings and conference calls and met with several vendors to see if this was even going to work. Once we got approval from the chiefs and city council, then we moved forward and we looked at the compatibility between our agencies. Another thing that Deb and I were talking about is that we got our state reimbursement at the same time to upgrade our phone system. So the project was really no small feat for us to do. And one of the reasons I think that it worked was timing. Timing because the technology was available to us to make this happen, and then also the team of people that were together to make it happen. We did our research to find different vendors. We met with several people that maybe couldn't do what we wanted to do and that were not next generation 911 compatible, and we finally settled on Intrado to help us with the phone system. So just a quick timeline, in 2013 we implemented the Intrado phone system, and we were able to answer phones in both agencies at the same time. And so we, in essence, at that point, answered the chief's question. Why can't the phones ring in both locations? And they did, and we were able to answer for each other's agencies. I think one of the things that we have talked about is that, our passion for this project really kind of bordered on obsession. I know that we would talk about it in the morning, that we had dreams about it. And, maybe troubleshooting on how to do it and then mapping out the project on how it was done. But we all had the same vision, and that was to come up with a solution for shared services with the same level or better level of service than what we currently had without losing our own communication center. And so I think, in retrospect, I think we've done that. But to talk about the networking aspect of it, I wanted to reintroduce Rhonda Kane, who will go step by step on actually how we network the two agencies together.
Thank you very much. I know that I've already been introduced, but just to tell you a little bit more about my background. My name is Rhonda Kane Alcantara. Kane is my maiden name that I used while I was working as a police officer. I was a police officer with the city of Burlingame for 30 years. And after retirement, since I had been involved in the IT services at the city of Burlingame, I decided to start a company doing IT consulting and projects. So I kind of fell into this project because I manage and support the city of Burlingame's IT infrastructure as well as the city of San Bruno. So I split my time between those two agencies. So it was a natural fit. One of the reasons why I think the city of San Bruno and the city of Burlingame are so compatible is because I like to call them a full-service dispatch center. The dispatchers that work in these agencies are not just people that answer the phones and give out the calls over the radio to the officers, but they actually are the assistant of the police officers. So, and our goal, of course, in these kind of agencies is to do as much as we can in the center so that we can keep the officers out in the street, where they can go out and be doing what they need to do. So these two agencies are very similar, and I learned that because I work for both of them, that they're very similar in their structure, they're very similar in what they do. And I also work part-time for the city of San Bruno and have also worked in the past part-time in the dispatch centers. So I am a dispatcher, I'm a trained dispatcher. In fact, I worked yesterday, Deb, in San Bruno. And so I just want to say that where maybe the vision of this was to have a backup dispatch center, which we certainly have now, even though the project is not complete, we have enough where we've actually had occasion to use it as a backup center. When we had a problem in one center about 3 weeks ago, they evacuated and went into the other center, and we're able to continue functioning. just as it, to the officers, they didn't really even need to know the difference as to where their dispatcher was in residence at the time. So you made me lose my train of thought. So at any rate, so I work in the center, but it's not just for emergencies. I use it when I work there. I use the system every day. Yesterday, I was working with a very fine dispatcher in the city of Burlingame, and I was up in the city of San Bruno. And generally, especially during the early morning hours, there's only one dispatcher in each agency. And if you get a major injury accident or something where the phones are ringing off the hook, you can't answer them all. It's simply impossible. And so for that reason, the dispatcher in the other agency can help, And because we have this shared CAD system, which I'll talk about in a minute, they're able to just pick up the phone, put the call in, I pick it out of the list and I send it off, or should they put notes into the call that I've already started. So we are working together, not just in an emergency situation, but we are working together every single day. If one dispatcher in one center needs to go to the restroom, which is something that dispatchers were never allowed to do before, you say, can you just listen to my radio for a minute while I go do that? And so it has opened up all kinds of possibilities for us. So I want to talk a little bit about the necessary steps that we have gone through. Most of these things we have completed. The major ones are complete now. We still have a couple of little things that we need to finish up before we can say this project is complete. The number one thing is we needed to be on the same network. So that was already accomplished because San Mateo County has a network called LawNet where all the law enforcement agencies are connected together. I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with that. So because that was already in place and because the manager of the LawNet is telecommunications engineering, I'm sure most of you know Daryl Jones, we hired him to consult. Christine already mentioned that. To consult us on how we could make all of this traffic that we needed to flow between these two agencies happen over that network. So we did run on that network for a period of time. However, we decided that that network was not quite as fast as we needed, didn't have the bandwidth that we needed. And so we ended up contracting with Utility Telephone to provide new T1 circuits. So currently we have 7 separate T1s with a 10 megabit bandwidth, and we made that part of LawNet. So we actually have 2 paths now to LawNet between San Bruno and Burlingame. And then we are maintaining the original LawNet circuit as a backup. We actually did some testing last week on it where we fell back onto LawNet, and boy does that CAD run slower. But it runs, and that's the point. I mean, you can use it. It's not as good, and obviously you want to get your main circuits back up as quickly as possible, but if you have to, you can use it. So the second part of the project was to find a 911 phone system that was able to do what we wanted to do. And so we interviewed several vendors, and we finally settled on Entrado, who promised us that we could do all of these things, and actually they have come through. We have been able to do it. So there are a couple of ways that Entrado does things. We are set up in a multi-node configuration where we share a database. So that means that we have all of our users and all of our phone numbers and everything are in a single database that is housed at the city of Burlingame and replicated to the city of San Bruno across this network that we've set up. And so we decided that it would be most efficient if we were going to use this on a daily basis to have these constantly connected and use this single database. Now, Entrado can also give you 2 databases so that you can log off and then you can log back in as another agency. So you can also be connected to other people and use it in a different way. And certainly if we were to connect to an agency that was very, very busy where the phones are ringing constantly, we probably wouldn't want to have all those phones ringing in both centers all the time. But the city of San Bruno and the city of Burlingame are very similar in size. The phones ring, you know, some days it's more in Burlingame, some days it's more in San Bruno. And so we decided to set it up so we could constantly be answering the phones and talking on the phones at our partner agency. So each agency maintained their 911 trunks. We did not move those at all. And we also have backup, the 911 switch that we can send off to someone else. We did not change that to this partner agency because that gives us a second backup. So Burlingame, the backup is San Mateo, and for San Bruno, the backup is county. So if necessary, if there's a problem with the connection between these 2 agencies and you still need to send your 911 calls off-site, you can have the switch flipped at where your backup is. And so that we didn't take that out. One of the challenges was to connect each agency's in-house phone systems to this. And we have different ones. So they have Cisco in San Bruno, and they have ShoreTel in Burlingame. And so there were some challenges there in making this work the way that we wanted it to. For example, in San Bruno, when we first started, the Cisco phone vendors told us that the business phones had to ring everywhere, all day, all night, in both places. And that didn't fly very well. The dispatcher said, this ringing is giving me, you know, post-traumatic stress, you got to make it stop. So we went back to the vendor and said there's got to be a way, and after a number of false starts on that, we finally were able to accomplish that task so that the records handles all of the business phones. They don't ring in the dispatch centers unless records is not in residence, which happens in San Bruno because they have a lot of records calls. They don't leave until 9 o'clock or midnight, and in Burlingame they leave at 5 o'clock, and then those calls are answered by the dispatch centers. So we needed to set up different ringtones to help with this PTSD issue so that you knew whether you were responsible for that phone line or not. And so after a short time, the dispatchers are used to it. I hear a phone ringing and it's or if it's a Burlingame phone, and I go, okay, well, that's not my responsibility yet, unless she doesn't get the phone. And then I've got to help her pick it up, if she's on another line. You actually can see the line presence too. You can see when the other dispatcher's on a line, when she's got something on hold, so that you can tell, okay, it's time for me to step in and help because she's on the phone and she's got another call on hold, so I'm going to step in and I'm going to help. I'm going to answer this phone. And then one of the other things that I think that the managers will talk about a little bit is we kind of had to set up some rules for when to step in, because there were certain dispatchers that said, oh my God, I'm not going to answer a call for San Bruno because I'm scared. And, or vice versa. And so we kind of had to say, if it rings 3 times and they haven't picked it up, you help. It's time for you to step in. You know, those things don't have to be hard, fast rules, and I found if I notice that they're on the phone and they're busy and I can see on the CAD screen that they've got a big major incident going on, I'm going to help. You know, it doesn't have to fall into line with that. But we did have to set some black and white rules so that everybody understood what their role was. So the next step of this is the shared CAD system. So we had the same CAD system, but they were on 2 different servers when we first started with this project. And we actually did some experimenting on with those 2 CAD systems. It was a CAD system where you just brought up a terminal server, so we were able to bring up terminal servers on multiple servers and run the CAD. So we did that for a little while, and then we just recently bought the Sunridge RIMS, which is in use in most of the rest of San Mateo County, and we bought that together. So we exist together on one server. We have a mirrored environment in Burlingame, but our plan is to take the mirror and move that to San Bruno for off-site storage. And so we're going to be mirroring across that same network that I already talked about. So with the RIMS, we have separate databases for our records, but our CAD is shared. So any dispatcher can control any unit, can add in any call at any time. And that seems to be working out quite well. We had some kickoff meetings where we had to talk about what we could do the same, what we had to do the same, and what we had to do differently. For example, we had to have all the same call types. Burlingame had 1 million call types, and San Bruno had 10 or 15. So we had to come to an agreement on that, and sat down and went through all the call types until we came up with what we thought made the most sense. And we also had to learn about which tables we had to share, and now there's an agreement. You know, we're trying to formalize this agreement, but there's an agreement between the managers to discuss when you're going to add a new code or a new make a change to the table so that everybody benefits from it, everybody understands why it's needed. Let's see, I already talked about this stuff. Yeah. So the geofile that we got the county map, and that turned out to be a nightmare. It has improved because we've been working very hard on improving it. Turns out that the county didn't have all of the streets just right, and certainly the cross streets are not right at all. So we've had to make a bunch of changes after we imported that. But we thought it was best so that we could be able to control the units when they have incidents that occur on our borders or outside of our borders, because that happens all the time. We have a lot of task forces in San Mateo County. We have the STEP program, we have GTF, we have officers. Even though we're controlling them in our CAD system, they're all over the place. So we thought it was best that we would have the entire county's geofile. We had to set up beat plans, and we had to set up unit identifiers that were unique. So between the 2 agencies, we had to make sure, like every agency had an S1, which is the #1 sergeant. And so we had to come up with a unique way to deal with that without having to type in too many characters, because the dispatchers are typing that day in and day out. So we came up with that, sat down, had a bunch of meetings where we came up with that. So the next part of the project was to bring in the radios. So the San Bruno primary radio is now available in Burlingame. We have not yet brought the Burlingame radio up into San Bruno. That is the next step. We didn't add any repeaters. The data is moving across this network. The audio is connected over LawNet. We're using an Adtran Atlas channel banks that are converting the audio to data, and then that data is transported across the T1s available in both agencies. So we're going to be using that same system to take the Burlingame radios and put them down, or the Burlingame radios and put them up in San Bruno. So we still have to do that. So another concern, these seem like little things, but these are functions that they have to perform. And when we first started this project, we sat down and said, what are the things that the dispatchers do, and what do they need to do when they're, if we completely close down one of these centers, we want to be able to operate seamlessly. And so we do a lot of control of doors for the officers. We open doors for them, we open doors for the citizens, we control doors in our jails, Sallyport doors, that sort of thing. So we are working with telecommunications engineering on building us a website that we can control these doors on. In fact, that project has already started. So we need to make sure that the dispatcher, when they say open the door in Burlingame, I can push a button and open the door. But of course, you don't want to be opening jail doors unless you can see that you're dealing with police officers. So we also have to have one another's building surveillance so that we can see what's going on in these rooms before we start opening these doors. And also for officer safety purposes, whenever there's somebody in residence in the jail, the dispatchers are required to keep an eye out to make sure that everything is okay. So both Burlingame and San Bruno currently have a web interface to our camera systems, and so because of our network, we're able to view one another's cameras. So there was no additional cost for that at all. We had to make sure that we could answer the lobby phone in both places. And so Burlingame didn't have a lobby phone. So they just had like a little intercom. So we had to take all of that intercom stuff out and put it into our ShoreTel phone system, which would then bring it into the Intrado phone system and make it available. So that was another thing that we had to do. San Bruno, fortunately, their lobby phone already rang into their phone system, so we didn't have to change anything there. So just little add-on miscellaneous things but necessary. I had to make the printers available in both centers. So that was something that on the workstations in one dispatch center, they can print to the other dispatch center. So that was something we had to do. The teletypes are routed around the county. You have to maintain your dedicated mnemonic. You have to be looking at that 24 hours a day. So we have the ability, because of our message switch, to route those things around, so that if your dispatchers are not in residence, they can route it to the other agency. So in conclusion, I think that it's already beneficial. We've already found a lot of benefit out of this, which I think they're going to talk about next. And we have a little bit more work to do, but we've found a way to keep our full service agency, or our full service dispatch centers open, and so that we can serve our officers and so that we can serve our citizens. So I'm going to turn it over now to Deb Shembry, who is filling in temporarily after her retirement as the Records and Dispatch Supervisor, and also has started working for me. Thank you.
Well, once we got all this in place, then we figured out we need to train everybody on how it works. Because between the 3 or 4 of us that were making all these, great decisions, we weren't the actual people that were going to be utilizing it every day, all day, day in and out. So what we did is we set up some training, and it was really a really good idea, because when we trained together, we became a team. We became a bigger team. We always had a San Bruno team. We always had a Burlingame team. But now we have a shared services team. And it's nice because we did our training together in the phones. We had training set up at Burlingame PD, and it was really good. We got to see the other comm center. We've had a mutual time when people can see who that face is on the other end of the radio. So that's become really beneficial. We now function as one big team instead of 2 separate agencies. We've done some good things. We've made some mandatory time where we do sit-alongs in each other's agency. We have a couple of new dispatchers training in San Bruno right now, and during their training process, I asked Christine if they could come down and spend a couple of hours at Burlingame PD, just to be able to know that they can answer the San Bruno. If they ever had to bug out, they would be able to know where to go, know who they are, know how to get in, know how to plug in, sign on, and everything else. So we've tried to have sit-alongs in both agencies. We use this daily, and it really is important. Rhonda did mention it earlier. One day I was working, she was down in Burlingame, and I needed a potty break. I was like, Rhonda. So she was able to put her headset on, answer my phones, answer my radios, and I could just run down the hall real quick. Before that didn't happen. Usually I brought in a police clerk who was scared to death that the 911 was going to ring, and they're going, hurry up, pee fast. No, but that was how it was. But now we have a better luxury for that. Rhonda did touch on the call flow, and it really is incredible how it is used every day. Even when I'm sitting in there and I can see two phones are on hold in Burlingame, and there's nothing going on in my agency, I will definitely pick up a phone and put in a call for service. It's really incredible where you can help out your fellow dispatcher and then just send them a quick little message either by phone or through the CAD RMS that, hey, I threw in a call for you. We've done this a couple of different times as far as testing goes, and during the training process when we were trying to learn the CAD RMS portion, after training I would just plug in at Burlingame PD and start answering San Bruno's phone calls before they could even get them, just so they could see that this is something that works on the fly. The benefits, you've heard us talk all morning about them. The improved officer safety, well, that's incredible because we don't have to worry about, an officer that's out there out in the field, and all of a sudden the phones are blowing up in one agency. If that dispatcher can't answer that officer, that's a huge officer safety problem. But our partner agency, we can jump in there and we can help out. We can either answer the phones so the dispatcher in the agency can answer her officers, or vice versa. It really gives us that flexibility. It improves our public safety because when we had multiple phones ringing off the hook, before we had this system, they would busy out. And when we had the San Bruno explosion, we had a lot of people call 911 and it was busy because we overloaded the trunks. This will never happen because we can double our dispatchers and our call-taking abilities on the fly. The cost savings, we did share all of our costs in the training for the phones and the radios. We trained approximately 20 or so dispatchers on the Entrado phones, police clerks and dispatchers. When we brought in the CAD RMS portion, we trained over 200 people, and we did it together. And we had cost savings in that because we didn't have a bill for each agency from Sunridge Systems. We did it together. But that also helped us to network and say, hey, is this working for you? How is that working for me? So it really was a mutual benefit to do all that. The equipment and cost savings, Rhonda talked about that, the chief mentioned that. Now we've got a shared system with Sunridge Systems. If we would have each bought our own system, it would have been upwards of $500,000 each. But because we are shared, it wasn't that. So we were able to save money that way. And our city councils both really like that. Next. We have a couple of examples we wanted to just kind of touch on in regards to how we really utilize this every day. It's not just a big thing on paper. So, Christine, did you want to
Sure, I'll start. How is everyone doing? I've been to a few of these technology forums, and I honestly don't remember anything that people say. And so at least we'll make this short for you, okay? Yeah, we're getting close to lunch here. All right. This is a few of our success stories thus far. On September 7th, Burlingame experienced a natural gas odor citywide, generating numerous 911 calls. The San Bruno dispatchers assisted with the overload of the 911 calls and created additional calls for service, which was a huge help.
Now, like I mentioned earlier, with the explosion, we had one dispatcher on and one police clerk on during that time, and that's only 2 people that could answer the 119 calls that came in that first hour after the explosion. So had we had this system in place, it would have been a whole different story. We would have had so many more calls been answered. I would imagine we wouldn't have had any or all busy out. So you can see what a difference 2 or 3 years makes.
We have the next slide, Jackie, is it? San Mateo PD, who is our backup 911 center, had construction going on in their building. So they created the need to evacuate their building and then dispatch out of Burlingame. So we had Burlingame, San Bruno, and San Mateo all dispatching out of one center.
I was working in San Bruno that day, and they had forgotten to tell me that they were going to be doing that. So all of a sudden, the phones are like ringing off the hook, and I'm thinking, what the heck is going on there? Well, San Mateo had forwarded all of their calls to the Burlingame Center, and anything that rings in the Burlingame Center rings in our center. So now there's 3 dispatchers, and we're totally overwhelmed because they're ringing off the hook. I just started answering, and I had a San Bruno CAD, a San Mateo CAD, and a Burlingame CAD. And when 911 rang, I just ran, Police Department emergency. I didn't identify which police department it was. I just had to pick which one it was after I figured out what it was. But it was very interesting. It was a great learning experience. But next time, could you let me know when that's happening?
For sure. The next slide was June 16th. These are all recent. San Bruno began experiencing network problems. Rhonda, how did that happen? It developed into a full network outage, and then between San Bruno Police Department and Burlingame. So then we had to have the San Bruno dispatchers come down to Burlingame, and they dispatched for 4 hours.
We almost had to, blast her out of there. Although they knew that that was in place, that they could do that, it's the comfort zone of your own comm center, being able to, do what you need to do outside of your comm center was a little scary. So, that was a component that we really didn't think about, just making sure that they're comfortable in leaving and making sure that we address it, because the last thing you want to do is leave your comm center and, hope for the best. But it really was a great learning experience, because they got down there and they worked there for 4 hours side by side, and we had absolutely no loss of service for the officers, no loss of service for the citizens. Like Rhonda mentioned earlier, the officers didn't know that the dispatchers were dispatching San Bruno officers from the Burlingame Police Department. They didn't need to know. It worked fine.
Do you want to handle it?
On the last, actually just last week, San Bruno had a auto versus pedestrian, and again, that generated a number of 911 calls. And so what we were able to do is obviously get everybody rolling. There's one dispatcher on at the time that it occurred, and we doubled our dispatch staff on the fly because Burlingame helped answer those calls. So it really is not always the big catastrophe that this is designed for. This is a mutual agreement between both of our agencies that we use pretty much daily.
So just on the last slide, I am all about inspiration and vision, and one of the things that I think about when I'm in this room is that you help us do this and make this happen in our agencies. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you for that, because we're going to have text to 911 and video to 911, and without that technology, we're not going to be able to meet the needs of the public. One of the things is that we do choose our vendors wisely, and so that was a really important component, that we had someone do what we wanted them to do. And then, some of the agencies that we did talk to didn't want to talk about technology at all. So, we had the vision with our chief that wanted to move forward in that. Some agencies are still using rotary phones. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. Just in conclusion.
Well, I think we've demonstrated that this really does work. We set our goal to do the things that we needed to do. We had a lot of hurdles that we jumped through and jumped over, but it didn't stop us. I'm very proud to be part of this project. We have done something in this county that no other agency has done. I mean, a lot of places have consolidated their dispatch centers, but it's because of mergers or consolidation or cost savings. But we have kept our comm centers open, and we do have, we have the security now to know that if we do have something that goes wrong, or if the big one happens, tomorrow, we do have a partner that we can help manage that incident.
So I know we're getting close to time, but if you have a few questions, Rhonda would be more than happy to answer.
Yeah, she talks your language better. Oh, she wants to talk.
Yep. One last thing. I think it's important to recognize, we've talked about it a little bit, but we doubled the size of our comm centers with a minimal investment. So if you think about these small agencies in San Mateo County, it's usually one dispatcher on at any given time. I'm a chief that came from a small place that we were forced to go in and relieve the dispatcher for lunch breaks, and I've got about this much knowledge on dispatching now, but I can walk through and I can pick the phone up and I can dispatch. To have that whole other side, when you talk about the explosion, there were 3 911 seats in San Bruno. There's 5 in Burlingame. We now have 8. Eventually the hope is that we'll end up linking up with, or at least my vision, that we'll end up linking up with Redwood and Menlo Park in a different partnership that will allow us to expand those seats even further out. From a chief's perspective, I think this has been a unbelievable project. I would love to tell you I had a whole lot to do with it. I asked a single question. I showed up with the money. I got the buy-in from the council and the manager. But what really comes down to, you work with the best, you hire the best, and you promote the best. and that's these three. So, thank you.